Welcome to the first of 5 video sessions. These sessions are designed to give you a quick reminder on how to answer Unit 3 exam questions. We start with Inference, which is 6 marks. Our example focuses on the Jarrow Crusade. If you have forgotten what that was, here is a quick reminder of what the Jarrow Crusade was all about.
I beg to ask leave to present to this Honourable House the petition of the people of Jarrow, praying for assistance in the resuscitation of its industry. During the last 15 years, Jarrow has passed through a period of industrial depression without parallel in the town's history. Its shipyard is closed, its steel works have been denied the right to reopen. Where formerly 8,000 people, many of them skilled workers, were employed, only 100 men are now employed on a temporary scheme. The town cannot be left derelict, and therefore your petitioners humbly pray that His Majesty's Government and this Honourable House should realise the urgent need that work should be provided without further delay.
In the opinion of His Majesty's Government, such marches can do no good to the causes for which they are represented to be undertaken, are liable to cause unnecessary hardship to those taking part in them, and are altogether undesirable.
No man has hired us. With pocketed hands and lowered faces, we stand about in open places and shiver in unlit rooms. Only the wind moves over the empty fields, untilled, where the plough rests at an angle to the furrow. In this land there shall be 1 cigarette to 2 men, to 2 women 1/2 pint of bitter ale. In this land no man has hired us. Our life is unwelcome, our death unmentioned in the time.
Okay, so here is the first source. It reads, "The Jarrow Crusade was one of 4 hunger marches to London in 1936. They were the National Hunger March, the Jarrow Crusade, the National League of the Blind March and the Scottish Veterans March. They passed through the same towns and sometimes crossed paths. They were ignored in the same way by the government and were all carefully watched by the police." And here is the question that you're going to be asked. What can you learn from this source about unemployment in 1936? What we are being asked to look for here is information beyond its face value. So let's have a look at the source again. We'll read it. It says, "The Jarrow Crusade was one of 4 hunger marches to London in 1936. They were the National Hunger March, the Jarrow Crusade, the National League of the Blind March and the Scottish Veterans March. They passed through the same towns and sometimes crossed paths. They were ignored in the same way by the government and were all carefully watched by the police." My response could simply be, people went on hunger marches. This is true, but it doesn't take much working out, really, does it? It isn't even an inference, because that is exactly what the source actually tells us. Here's another response. Unemployment must have been a serious problem because the source says there were 4 different hunger marches. That suggests people had no money for food because they were not working, and the number of marches suggests a lot of unemployment. Here, the student has correctly identified that unemployment was a serious problem. This is their inference. He has used the evidence from the source which says that there were 4 different hunger marches as his way of explaining that inference. He does indeed add additional information, but he has already gathered at least 2 marks. Here's a second one. Unemployment must have been a serious problem because the source says there were 4 different hunger marches. It also suggests that unemployment affected certain towns more than others, as the source says they passed through the same towns. Once again, the student has inferred that certain towns were affected more than others. The source does not state that, other than to say that the marches passed through the same towns. And finally, a third inference. Unemployment must have been a serious problem because the source says there were 4 different hunger marches. It also suggests that unemployment was seen as a threat to public order as they were carefully watched by the police. Once again, the student has inferred that the marches were seen as a threat to public order. The evidence is from the statement, carefully watched by the police, which one can find in the source. Now what we need to do is to consider how all 3 of these inferences can be put together. Okay, let's have a look at the full response. The question says, what can you learn from this source about unemployment in 1936? It's a 6-mark question, which means we're looking for 3 inferences backed up from information from the source. Here's the response. Unemployment must have been a serious problem because the source says that there were 4 different hunger marches. That suggests people had no money for food because they were not working, and the number of marches suggests a lot of unemployment. In addition, it also suggests that unemployment affected certain towns more than others, as the source says that various marches often pass through the same towns. Finally, it also suggests that unemployment and the unemployed were seen as a threat to public order, as they were carefully watched by the police. As you can see, we have combined the 3 inferences that we have looked at over the course of this video into one complete answer. This response would gain full marks. Okay, let's summarise. As we have said before, these are known as inference questions, and the examiner is asking you to look beyond what the source actually says to what it might be suggesting or inferring. In addition, they want you to evidence your inference from the source. Now, when you begin an answer to question 1, it's very important that you begin in the correct way. The examples given in the previous few slides were a very confident response. However, in the pressure of an exam, it is sometimes very difficult to remain confident. Remember, we've all been there. One way to keep yourself focused is to practice starting your response in a way that forces you to infer. The best way to do this is to start your answer with the words, "Source A suggests that." This will make you concentrate on points that are not explicitly or clearly mentioned in the source and will stop you from simply retelling all the information from the source. Now, before you begin your response, read the source and pick out the words that the writer used to put over his or her point of view. Underline or circle them. These words will help you infer and will form your evidence to the inferences you make. When you make an inference, you need to explain what evidence demonstrates this. This is where the word "because" comes in. This forces you to explain yourself. Try not to copy whole chunks of text from the source. 1 or 2 words will demonstrate your evidence. So remember, as a quick summary, firstly, start with "this source suggests." Second, use "because" to explain your point. Thirdly, don't copy out whole chunks of text. Avoid that as much as you can. And finally, we're going to have a quick look at another example where we have underlined the key points that have been identified in the source. Okay, here's the next source. If we are involved in a war, our big cities may suffer heavy attacks from the air, at any rate in the early stages. Although our defences are strong and are rapidly growing stronger, some bombers will undoubtedly get through. We must ensure that the enemy does not achieve his main aims, the creation of anything like panic or the crippling dislocation of everyday life. We can save lives by evacuating children from the more dangerous areas, even though this will disrupt family life. Okay, let's have a look at the response. Source A suggests that evacuation was considered necessary because of the fear that bombers will undoubtedly get through at some point, even if not forever. It also suggests that while evacuation will inevitably mean the temporary breakup of families and family life, this is considered preferable to the likely loss of life if children stayed in heavily populated areas such as the big cities. This loss of life would permanently break up families, causing panic, which would inevitably cause problems. Okay, how do we get this? Well, firstly, we focused on necessary and fear. Bombers will undoubtedly get through gives us necessary, linked to avoiding the creation of anything like panic, which gives us fear. These two we can then apply to our answer. In addition, we've looked at considered preferable. The loss of life will cause crippling dislocation of everyday life, while evacuation will save lives, though disrupt family life. The difference between crippling and disrupt are therefore quite evident. To help you answer future questions, here is the mark scheme looking at level 3. It's important that we only ever focus on level 3. Level 1 and level 2 will never get us the marks we need.
Additional help and guidance can be found on the School VLE. More importantly, you will find all of this information, including the subsequent videos, at abbeyfieldhumanities.blogspot.com. Thank you very much for listening.